One of SpaceX's Starlink satellites has started doing cartwheels over your head after what the company politely calls an anomaly. Pieces have chipped off, it is tumbling out of control, and everyone is now pretending that this is fine. Today, we are going to walk through what actually happened, what it tells us about the Starlink mega constellation, and how close we're getting to turning low Earth orbit into the orbital equivalent of a junkyard full of Teslas on cinder blocks. Hello, my name is Gene Botkin. I'm a cybersecurity analyst working in the space domain, and I'm building a club for people who want to participate in the new space economy. Our topic today is the story of a Starlink satellite that partially broke up in orbit and which is now tumbling back to Earth. Let's begin. On December 17th, Starlink satellite 35956 was minding its own business at around 420 kilometers above the Earth. That is a pretty standard low Earth orbit, the same rough neighborhood as the International Space Station, except with fewer astronauts and more accountants watching collision probabilities. Then, something in the satellite went wrong. SpaceX reported that an anomaly had caused venting from the propulsion tank. In normal life, when a tank starts venting unexpectedly, you move away from it. But in orbit, you cannot move away, and the thing that is venting is the thing that is supposed to keep you pointed in the right direction. The result was a sudden change in the satellite's orbit, a drop of a few kilometers, and the beginning of a slow, uncontrolled tumble. Along with the tank issue came a small cloud of debris. Space Force trackers spotted new fragments near the satellite, moving with low relative speed. That suggests the spacecraft did not blow apart like an action movie. Think more chipped shingle than car bomb. The main body is still intact, but it is wounded and spinning, and no one is talking to it anymore. From a safety point of view, this is the part where public relations people earn their salaries. SpaceX announced that the satellite will re-enter within weeks and burn up completely in the atmosphere. No danger to the International Space Station, no risk of flaming Starlink routers crashing through your roof. They are almost certainly correct about that. A dead satellite at that altitude will spiral down under the drag, and Starlink buses are designed to fully disintegrate. The more interesting story is what this little mishap says about the world that we are building in orbit. Starlink already has nearly 9,300 active satellites up, with thousands more planned over the next decade. They launch new batches faster than most countries process driver's licenses. A single satellite going bad is a rounding error for the network, and for the environment that those satellites live in, every fragment matters. Low Earth orbit now holds more than 24,000 tracked pieces of hardware and debris big enough to monitor, and many, many more that are too small to follow, but big enough to wreck your day at orbital speed. When one spacecraft spits out fragments, even a small number, it adds shrapnel to a shooting gallery where everything moves at several kilometers per second. At that speed, a paint chip has the social grace of a rifle round. Satellite 35956 is also arriving on the heels of another story, a near miss between a Starlink craft and a spacecraft from a Chinese launch. That encounter, reported earlier this week, highlighted how much coordination in orbit still runs on emails, spreadsheets, and the occasional panicked phone call. You would think that when two nations with nuclear weapons share an orbital lane, they would invest in something better than, "Dear Sir or Madame, please move your satellite," and yet here we are. So, what actually happened to this particular satellite? The early analysis points to an internal failure rather than a collision. The venting tank suggests that something inside either overpressurized or leaked, and if there had been a hard hit from debris, the relative speeds of the fragments would likely be higher and the pattern a bit messier. At the moment, the incident looks like a reminder that hardware sometimes gets tired, especially when you operate hundreds of kilograms of metal and fuel in a harsh environment, command it remotely, and try to cut costs so the bandwidth bill on the ground does not make customers cry. SpaceX is now pushing a software update across the fleet to help protect against whatever went wrong here. They are also coordinating with NASA and the US Space Force to track the fragments and ensure that other satellites steer around them. This cooperation is good. The fact that we need it this often is less good. To understand why, it helps to zoom out and look at how Starlink operates. Think of Starlink as a flying global internet service provider where the routers are orbiting at a few hundred kilometers up. Each satellite talks to user terminals on the ground, and, increasingly, to other satellites with laser links. Those crosslinks let data move across the world without touching terrestrial fiber until it gets closer to the destination. For remote communities or moving platforms, it is magical. But for traditional telecom companies, it feels like a horror movie. From a systems point of view, Starlink is built with redundancy. If one satellite dies, then others can route around it. The network merely shrugs and carries on. That is part of why losing 35956 is no big deal for service quality. The user in rural Nebraska trying to stream Netflix will not notice that one of the orbital nodes is now spinning like a drunk figure skater. But material in orbit does not shrug quite so easily. Satellites cannot route around debris. They have to dodge it. SpaceX famously used automatic collision avoidance algorithms that shift Starlink satellites when the probability of impact passes a certain threshold. This has already led to thousands of avoidance maneuvers over the constellation's lifetime, and each new piece of junk makes those maneuvers slightly more frequent. Over time, you get a traffic pattern where spacecraft spend much of their lives dodging each other like drivers in a city where every car is texting. The crowding problem is not hypothetical. Models of a severe solar storm show that it would change orbital paths enough to increase collision risk dramatically. One recent study found that after such a storm, the average time to the first collision could be under 3 days. And once a collision occurs, it can generate a shell of fragments that threaten other satellites, which then collide and spawn more fragments. This cascading nightmare is known as the Kessler syndrome, and every little breakup nudges us a tiny step closer to that kind of event. To their credit, SpaceX designed Starlink satellites to deorbit at the end of life. They also place them low enough that atmospheric drag cleans up dead ones fairly quickly. In a world with a few hundred satellites, that would be enough. But in a world with tens of thousands of satellites across multiple constellations, run by different companies and countries with different priorities, that is only one piece of an ever-complicating puzzle. We do not yet have strong and enforceable rules for how to behave in this shared space. The agencies and companies involved have norms and guidelines. Many are well-intentioned, but there is no sheriff in orbit. There is a crowded orbital neighborhood where everybody promises to keep their yard tidy while quietly planning to add more cars to the driveway. Satellite 35956 becomes a character in this larger story. It is the unlucky cousin in a giant family, the one who blew a gasket and started throwing off bits of metal at 7.5 kilometers per second. For now, the debris is limited. The satellite is falling, and in a few weeks, the entire episode will end in a streak of plasma that no one sees. The record of the event will live on in tracking catalogs and PowerPoint decks at space safety conferences. Engineers will argue about failure modes, lawyers will argue about liability. A near miss with a Chinese spacecraft one week, a partial breakup the next, and more constellations on the way from the US, China, and Europe. The trend is clear. Low Earth orbit is becoming strategically important and physically crowded at the same time. For the new space economy, this is both a risk and an opening. There is already a market forming around tracking debris, ensuring against debris hits, and cleaning up junk. Startups like Odin Space are building sensor systems to measure tiny fragments and sell that data as a product, while companies like Arcasys look at on-orbit servicing and repair. And that is the free market's way of telling you that a problem exists. People think they can make money by solving it. For our purposes, the lesson is simple. If you want to live and work in orbit, then you need to treat space as an environment that can be degraded. The sky is not infinite in any useful sense. The valuable orbits are specified ranges of altitude and inclination, and we are filling them quickly. Every anomaly, every venting tank, and every stray bolt adds friction to the whole system. SpaceX will launch another batch of Starlinks. They will file incident reports, patch the software, tweak the hardware, and carry on. Users on the ground will keep streaming, militaries will keep buying connectivity, and astronomers will keep complaining that their images look like somebody dragged a fork across them. The story of this one satellite will fade. What remains beneath it is the pattern of behavior. Starlink 35956 shows how thin the line is between routine operations and interesting anomaly in a crowded sky. It reminds us that the large constellations are not abstract. They are specific machines with specific failure modes, and those failures happen in a shared space we all rely on for communications, weather, navigation, and soon to be warfighting. We will talk more on this channel about how to build an orbital economy that does not saw off the branch that it sits on. But for now, keep an eye on stories like this. They are early warnings about where the new space age is fragile and where people who understand both technology and strategy can make a difference. And if you found this breakdown useful, then hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts on mega constellations and orbital junk, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future deep dives on the new space economy. This has been Gene Botkin with Elenarda. Ends transmission.